Experts warn California of a disaster larger than any in world history, and it's not an earthquake. In fact, it's a megaflood, and it's coming to California. And experts say it could be the most expensive natural disaster in history. Now, the only problem is they blame it on climate change. When these floods have been occurring every 100 or 200 years, time immemorial. And this is just a way for them to glom on to some known fact and blame it on you. But let's get to some of the facts. Many Californians fear the big one. But the big one might not be what you think. It's not an earthquake. And it's not the mega drought they've been harping on. It's actually the exact opposite, a mega flood that results from a mega drought. And a new study in Science Advances shows or claims that climate change is making this, has doubled the chances, when in fact, the chances now are just as high as they've ever been. There's a 100% chance of a mega flood in California based on the historical data. And if it does occur, based on population density, it will be catastrophic. Now, Daniel Swan, a climate scientist with UCLA and a researcher involved in the study, describes a mega flood as a very severe flood event across a broad region that has the potential to bring catastrophic impacts to society in the areas affected. He said that a mega flood is similar to the 1,000-year flash flood events seen this summer in St. Louis and Kentucky, but only across a much wider area, such as the entire state of California. Now, these massive floods, which experts say would turn California's lowlands into vast inland seas, have previously happened in about once in a lifetime in California. But experts say climate change is increasing the likelihood, which is nonsense because the likelihood now is very high. We are at the threshold for the next event. It has nothing to do with you or me. It has everything to do with climate cycles. And the forecast is for, extreme snow in the Sierras and the Rockies this winter. And these patterns happen every solar cycle. There's an 11-year snow cycle in the West with peaks and troughs. And the next few years are heavy snow years. So if we also have heavy melt-off and maybe the right setup, it's go time. Now, what we know is a few things. That climate change has nothing to do with these heavy rain events. 6 years ago on this channel and on Magnetic Reversal News, we brought to you the data that shows that cosmic rays nucleate clouds. The cloud experiment at CERN proved this back in 2012, I believe. But we reached the cosmic ray maximum back in 2011. And we re-peaked again in 2020 and 21. Some of the highest cosmic ray levels ever recorded in human history, modern history. Now, granted, the cosmic rays were just as high back in 1965, I would imagine, but we don't have the actual data back then. So we're at the cosmic ray maximum. We're going to see 500-year and 1,000-year floods every 50 and 100 years instead. So the mega flood is coming to California, and it might be coming this cycle. Now, California is prone to these mega floods, and it's from atmospheric rivers. We've heard that over and over again, especially if you watch the channel. Now, these atmospheric rivers have been quite prevalent, and it's due to the fact that our jet stream is breaking down, forming a meridional flow, which creates a blocking pattern, where weather can continuously hit the same spot again and again and again. In this case, with an atmospheric river, it's bad news and heavy flooding, especially if there's snowpack. Now, according to the study, it said that atmospheric rivers could become consecutive for weeks on end, just like the model we're showing you here. Now, one of the authors of the study created this loop, which illustrates the water vapor transpiration and potential precipitation accumulation at selected time slices during a 30-day scenario. The area with the most destruction in this setup would be the Central Valley of California, including, but not limited to, Sacramento, Fresno, and Bakersfield. The Central Valley, roughly the size of Vermont and Massachusetts combined, produces a quarter of the nation's food supply, according to the USGS. And this area would literally be under an ocean of water. A flood with the size to fill this valley has the potential to be the most expensive geophysical disaster ever recorded on Earth, costing upwards of over $1 trillion and devastating the state's lowland areas, including Los Angeles and Orange counties, according to the study. That would be more than 5 times the cost of Hurricane Katrina, the current costliest disaster in U.S. history. Such a flood event in modern California would likely exceed the damages from a large magnitude earthquake by a considerable margin, according to the study. Now, the study is the first phase of a 3-part series studying the effects of a future megaflood in California. The next 2 phases are expected to be released in the next 2 to 3 years. Ultimately, the goals of the scientists is not just to understand these events scientifically, but also to help California prepare for them. It's not a question of when rather than if the megaflood occurs. It's when it occurs, because it's coming. It's happened before, and it will happen again. But according to these scientists, it will be worse because of you. Now, did you know over 150 years ago, a strong series of atmospheric rivers drenched the Golden State, causing one of the most exceptional floods in history, following a dry spell that left the West parched for decades? Yeah, that's the same setup we have now. And in fact, communities were demolished in minutes. You're looking at an 1861 photograph showing the flooding in Sacramento. It was the winter of 1861-62, and a historic megaflood transformed the San Joaquin and Sacramento valleys into a temporary but vast inland sea. Some areas had up to 30 feet of water for weeks, obliterating infrastructure, farmland, and towns. Sacramento, the new state capital at the time, was under 10 feet of debris-filled water for months. You better get a boat. Now, the catastrophe began December 1861, when 15 feet of snow fell in the Sierra Nevadas. We've seen recent storms matching up to this, so buckle your seatbelts. And that was followed by repetitive atmospheric rivers that dropped warm rain for 43 days thereafter, dumping water down the mountain slopes and into the valleys. For thousands of people, they lost their lives. 1/3 of the state's property was also destroyed. A quarter of California's cattle population drowned or starved. And 1 in 8 homes in the entire state were a complete loss by floodwaters. In addition, 1/4 of California's economy was obliterated, resulting in a statewide bankruptcy. Now, the scientific team warns a megaflood like this will happen again. But they're saying worse and more frequent, and it's your fault. Many of today's major cities, with millions of residents, are built directly on top of ancient flood deposits, putting far more people in harm's way. And they're using it against you, saying it's your fault. Because you burned too much fossil fuels, you did this. But this couldn't be further from the truth. These mega floods have occurred time immemorial, and they will occur again. And we're seeing them now. And we warned about them. And we hope you're preparing. Because it is coming. Now, the Great Flood of 1862 left devastation in its path across the state. And there are so many depictions. Here, Sacramento, K Street from the levee, inundation of the state capitol. This lasted for 30 days. And humanity forgot. But the hypothetical arc storm flood areas are mapped here in the map. So I hope you don't live in one of the blue or dark blue zones south of Sacramento. The entire San Francisco Valley, from San Francisco to San Jose, is estimated to be under 3 to 10 foot of water for weeks. Here's some scenarios of what would happen in LA alone. The flooding would be epic and would happen almost instantaneously. From San Bernardino to Northridge, the waters would flow down the valleys and destroy everything in its wake with very little warning. And north of the mountains, water will spill out over the Mojave, creating blooms, the likes of which no one has ever seen. This unprecedented event has been well known by developers in these areas. And there's lots of insurance involved. But when an event like this happens, it will literally bankrupt society, just like it did back in 1862. And 5 hours on, as quickly as it started, it's all over. There will be no escape. If you're within the flood zone, all the roads will be washed out. You'll certainly need a boat. And with 12 cubic kilometers of water rushing down from the mountains, the catastrophe will be epic, unprecedented. And with modern technology, the footage, well, will be sad, tragic, and a warning of things to come, as this is only the beginning of what we've been warning you about for quite some time. The Megaflood. Now, here's a really great, less than 2-minute expose on everything I just said and a little more. So before we end the video, let's take a look at this video and bring us up to speed.
If history is any indication, California's due for a flood of biblical proportions. That state's last mega flood is actually known as the Great Flood of 1862, and the next one could occur sooner rather than later. I'm meteorologist Jason Myers, and geological evidence points to these huge flood events occurring about every 100 to 200 years. The Great Flood of 1862 wasn't because of an El Nino, but another wet weather pattern commonly known as an atmospheric river. And it's just what it sounds like. A constant flow of water vapor hitting the west coast, falling as rain in the lower elevations and snow in the mountains. This particular atmospheric river walloped the entire coast and lasted for an extremely long time, from November 1861 to January 1862. However, the resulting flooding lasted well into spring and summer. Melting mountain snow and multiple heavy rains caused flooding from Oregon all the way down to Mexico. It turned California's Central Valley into an inland sea. Sacramento, the state capital, was underwater for months, and they had to move the entire state government to nearby San Francisco. It's unknown how many people died from this great flood. Hundreds of thousands of livestock were lost, and about a fourth of all the real estate in California was destroyed. Since then, the U.S. Geological Survey and emergency planners have studied this event extensively so they can better prepare themselves for when it happens again. They even have an official name for it, arc storm. Unofficially, they're just calling it the other big one because it's going to happen. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos.
You heard what he said.
The great.
It's going to happen. Hopefully not sooner than later. And we know this because of patterns we've seen set up. Multiple atmospheric rivers have been hitting the West Coast. We have a mega drought happening on the West Coast, and now we have record snow we've been seeing build up higher and higher. And the prediction this winter is for another record snow season in the West Coast. Will we see the atmospheric river set up in the winter for it to rain potentially from November to January? Let's hope not. But at least we have the toolbox and the data we need to be prepared for when it does start occurring. And we will know how to react. And that's a boom to knowledge. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance when the next mega flood is coming to California and I don't live there. Thank God. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Share this with like-minded people, especially those that live in the Golden State. And be safe. We love you. The next mega flood is coming soon. And that's a boom.